I'm sitting in a conference room at Mercer and Associates, and my hands are shaking, not from fear, from rage that I've learned to hide so well that no one sees it anymore. It's October 18th, Thursday, 3:47 p.m. The afternoon light is gray and weak, coming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook downtown Portland, the kind of light that makes everything feel temporary. 2 months ago, I submitted my resignation letter. Clean, professional, 2 weeks' notice. I was leaving this place because I'd gotten the position I'd been chasing for 3 years, Senior Marketing Director at Beacon Analytics. $185,000 a year, a real title, respect. The kind of job that makes you stand up straighter at dinner parties. But that was before. Across the table from me sits Richard Caldwell, my boss, my mentor, I thought. The man who I'd stayed late for 247 times. The man who I'd defended in meetings when others questioned his strategies. The man who once told me, after finishing a 60-hour week on a campaign, that I had real potential. He's wearing a navy suit. His wedding ring catches the light. He's not looking at my eyes. "I'm going to be direct with you, Claire," he says, and his voice is gentle. "That's how I know this is going to hurt. Beacon came to me yesterday. They wanted to talk about your background, your experience, your readiness." I don't move. My jaw is locked. I've practiced this, the perfect calm expression. The girl who takes feedback without flinching. "They have concerns," he continues. "They're wonderful people, Claire, truly, but they felt that maybe you need another year or 2 here before you're ready for that level of responsibility." The room is silent, except for the sound of traffic 8 stories below. He pulled the position. He had called Beacon Analytics, and he had pulled the position. Before everything broke. People who know me now, people at Mercer, they think I'm cold, competent, someone who shows up, does the work, asks the right questions in meetings, and leaves without needing to be friends with anyone. But that's not who I was. 3 years ago, when I started at Mercer and Associates, I was different, softer. I trusted. I believed that if you worked hard enough, if you were smart enough, if you showed up at 7 a.m. and left at 7 p.m. and made yourself indispensable, the system would reward you. That's what they tell you. That's what you're supposed to believe. I grew up in a small town in eastern Oregon. My mother was a nurse. My father was a contractor who drank himself to death when I was 19. My mother worked double shifts to keep me in a private school, and I actually swore to her, that I would make something of myself, that the sacrifice would mean something. I graduated from University of Oregon with a degree in business administration. No debt, because I worked 3 jobs and lived in a studio apartment with 3 other girls. I was hungry, not metaphorically. Literally hungry sometimes, choosing between groceries and the application fees for internships. The hunger shaped me in ways I didn't understand. When I got hired at Mercer, I cried, not at my desk, in my car, for 20 minutes. It was 2021. I was 26. The salary was $62,000 a year. To me, that was extraordinary. That was proof that I had made it. Richard hired me himself. He was 44, charismatic, and he had a way of making you feel like he saw something in you that no one else could see. During my interview, he asked me about my background, and when I told him about my father, about my mother's sacrifices, he leaned forward and said something I still remember. "People like you don't come along very often, Claire. You've already won the hardest battle. You've survived. Everything else is just application." I believed him. I believed that he believed in me. For the first year and a half, I was perfect. I was grateful. I accepted every project that was handed to me. When the quarterly report needed to be redone the night before the board meeting, I was there. When a client was unhappy, I was the one who stayed on the call until they were satisfied. I was the one who could be counted on. And Richard noticed. He would stop by my desk in the morning with coffee and ask how I was doing. "Real talk," he'd say. "Are you happy here? Because I want you to be happy. You deserve that." I felt seen. I felt valued. I felt like I had finally found the place where I belonged. By 2023, I was making $95,000. I had a one-bedroom apartment with a view of the park blocks. I had bought myself a new car. I was paying my mother's mortgage. I was sending my younger brother to community college. I was, as far as I could tell, thriving. What I didn't see was the rope that was already wrapped around my throat. What I didn't understand was that gratitude makes you blind. Deception. In July of 2024, a position opened up. Senior Marketing Director. The job I had been working toward. The job that paid $185,000 and came with an office and the title everyone in the industry would recognize. Richard called me into his office on a Tuesday morning. "I want you to apply," he said. "Officially, there will be other candidates, but I want you to know you're my recommendation. You're ready for this." I remember what I did. I remember standing up and walking around his desk and hugging him. I was crying. I was thanking him. I felt like I had won the lottery. The interview process took 6 weeks. I interviewed with the executive team, with the board, with the HR director, with Beacon Analytics CEO, a woman named Margaret Chen who asked me questions about leadership philosophy and risk management and why I thought I could handle the pressure of managing a team of 8. I nailed it. I knew I did. On August 22nd at 2:15 p.m., Margaret Chen called me. She offered me the position, $185,000, starting September 15th, benefits package that made my head spin, a signing bonus of $20,000. I said yes before she finished the sentence. That same day, Richard took me to lunch to celebrate. We went to a restaurant in the Pearl District, somewhere expensive with white tablecloths and waiters who poured your water without asking. "I told you," Richard said. "I told you that you were ready. You just needed to believe it." I believed everything he said. That was the problem. I submitted my resignation letter the next morning. I gave my 2 weeks' notice, as was professional. I gave Mercer time to transition my responsibilities, to find someone to replace me, to tie up loose ends. What I didn't know was that Richard had already tied them up in a different way. 6 days before my last day at Mercer, I got a call from Beacon's HR director. Her name was Susan. She sounded nervous. "We need to schedule a call with you and Margaret," she said. "Just a quick formality, nothing to worry about." But she sounded worried. The call was scheduled for 4 p.m. I spent 4 hours before that call in a state of quiet panic. What had happened? Was there a problem? Had they changed their minds? I had already given notice. I had already told my team that I was leaving. I had already told my mother. Margaret's voice, when she got on the call, was different than before. Professional but distant. "Claire, we wanted to touch base with you about something. A conversation came up during our final due diligence." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. "We spoke with Richard Caldwell as part of our reference check, standard procedure, and he expressed some reservations about the fit of this role for you at this time." The room started spinning. "He said," Margaret continued, "that while you're talented, you may not have the leadership experience necessary for managing a senior team. He suggested that another year or 2 at your current level might be beneficial for your growth trajectory." I couldn't breathe. "After careful consideration, we've decided to open the position back up to the broader market. We think it's the right move for you, professionally. It gives you time to develop additional skills." She was firing me, but nicely, with corporate language and the pretense of caring about my career development. Richard had destroyed this. Richard, who told me I was ready. Richard, who had encouraged me to apply. Richard, who had hugged me and told me I could do it. Richard had gone behind my back and told them I wasn't good enough. The fall. The worst part wasn't losing the job. The worst part was that I had already lost everything else. I had given notice. I had told my team, my friends, my family. I had already started saying goodbye to my apartment, to my life in Portland. My mother had told her friends at the hospital. My brother had told his college roommate. The news had spread through my small social circle like a wildfire, and now I had to go backward and explain that I wasn't getting the promotion after all. I had to call my mother and tell her that maybe I couldn't keep paying her mortgage. For 3 days after that call, I didn't go to Mercer. I called in sick. I lay in my apartment and stared at the ceiling and tried to understand how someone I had trusted so completely could betray me so deliberately. Because it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a misunderstanding. Richard had made a deliberate choice to sabotage my career. I needed to understand why. It took me a week of obsessive thinking, of going through conversations and emails and interactions to piece it together. 3 weeks before the position had opened, Richard had asked me to work on a campaign pitch for a new luxury client. It was important, he said. It would define his year-end performance review. I built that campaign from scratch: market research, demographic analysis, competitor positioning, creative direction, messaging strategy, a full 60-page presentation with research backing every claim. He presented it to the client. He presented it to the board, and they loved it. There were emails, which I should have kept, praising the campaign as innovative and exactly what we needed to move the needle. The campaign was attributed to Richard. I didn't care about the credit. I cared about the work. But Richard had seen that work, that quality, that level of strategic thinking, and he had understood that I was becoming a threat. I was becoming senior enough, capable enough, that I was going to move up and out. And when I moved up, people might notice that the campaigns bearing his name had actually been built by me. So he kept me. And when keeping me at Mercer wasn't enough, when I had found another path away from him, he destroyed that path instead. I went back to work on a Monday morning, 8 days after the call from Beacon. I walked into the office, and it was like walking through a graveyard. People knew. Somehow everyone knew. There were pitying looks. There were whispers that stopped when I passed. Someone had told someone who had told someone, and now the whole office understood that I had failed, that I wasn't ready, that Richard's quiet suggestion had been right. At 10 a.m., Richard came to my desk. "I wanted to check in with you," he said. "Make sure you're okay." I looked up at him. I was quiet for 3 seconds, long enough for him to see that I knew. "I'm fine," I said. "I really think Beacon was making a mistake," he continued. "But in a way, I'm glad. You're too valuable here. I don't know what I'd do without you." He was gaslighting me. He was trying to rewrite reality, to make me believe that his sabotage had actually been about protecting me, about wanting what was best for me. It was so perfect, so calculated, so evil. And I understood in that moment that I couldn't trust the system. I couldn't trust the company. I couldn't trust that working hard and being good at your job would protect you. The system was designed to protect people like Richard, not people like me. I needed to protect myself. For 2 weeks, I played the role I was supposed to play, the grateful employee who was so glad to stay. I went to meetings. I worked on campaigns. I smiled when people asked if I was okay. I watched Richard take credit for ideas that were mine. I listened to him tell colleagues that I had just needed a bit more seasoning for that director position. But something inside me had changed. The person who trusted had died. And the person who remained was someone I didn't fully recognize yet. The shift. I stopped eating lunch in the office. I started going to the coffee shop on the corner and sitting alone with a notebook. I wrote down everything I could remember about Richard, every campaign, every idea, every instance of him presenting work as his own, every meeting where I had suggested a strategy and he had introduced it 2 weeks later as his innovation. I also did something else. I started canceling plans with friends. I stopped answering calls from my mother. I became the person everyone said I was: cold, distant, isolated, because isolation was safer, and because I needed space to think. My resignation was already in. I had given notice, but I hadn't left yet. I was still at Mercer, still in the building, still walking past Richard's office every single day. And now I had a choice to make. I could leave quietly, take the loss, and try to rebuild my career elsewhere. Or I could burn it down first. The first thing I did was go to my email archives. I scrolled back through 3 years of correspondence, emails where Richard had asked me to do work, emails where I had sent him completed projects, email chains where I had explained my strategy, and he had copied that explanation, word for word, into a presentation to the board. I screenshot 47 of them. I created a folder on my personal cloud drive called Documentation, and I began building a case against him. Next day, I did something that would have got me fired if they found out. I downloaded my complete performance reviews. I copied the files that contained my campaign metrics, my project completion records, my client feedback scores. I was methodical about it. I used my personal laptop, connected through my phone's hotspot, so nothing would show up on the company network. One file at a time. Never more than 5 minutes in any given day, so nothing would raise red flags in the activity logs. I was being paranoid, probably, but paranoia is just clarity with better survival instincts. On September 3rd, I did something I'd never done before. I went to an attorney's office, a woman named Laura Kessler who specialized in employment law. I brought the screenshots. I brought the performance reviews. I brought documentation of the campaign I had created for that luxury client, a copy I had kept on my personal laptop from the day I finished it. "This is workplace fraud," Laura said, looking at the emails. "He's claiming work that isn't his. It's intellectual property theft." "What can I do?" I asked. "Right now, document more. Record conversations with him if you're in a one-party consent state, which Oregon is. Build a stronger case. And then we decide whether we go to the company, to a lawyer, or to the press." The press. The possibility of that sent a shock through my system. I realized in that moment that I didn't want a settlement or a quiet resolution. I wanted him exposed. I wanted the industry to know what he'd done. I wanted people to see him for what he was. I wanted revenge. That afternoon, I called Richard's office and asked if I could meet with him. He agreed, eagerly. He always did. We sat in the same conference room where he had congratulated me on the Beacon offer, the one with the gray light and the view of the city. I had a digital voice recorder in my jacket pocket. "I've been thinking about my career," I said, "and I want to talk about that position that opened up, the director role." He relaxed slightly. He thought this was about the promotion. "Of course, what about it?" "I built the luxury client campaign that got you the board approval for the director position." I saw his face change. For just a moment, I saw him drop the mask. "That was a collaborative effort," he said. "No," I said quietly. "I researched it. I wrote it. I presented the strategy to you, and you copied it into your presentation. Email receipts prove it." He stood up. "I think you're confused about how corporate projects work, Claire." "I'm not confused," I said. "And I'm not confused about why you told Beacon I wasn't ready. You were afraid I would leave, and you needed my work more than you needed me as an employee. So you destroyed the opportunity to make sure I'd stay." He walked to the door and opened it. "I think you should take the rest of the day off. You seem stressed." But his hands were shaking. I had hit something. I had cracked the facade and I had seen the truth underneath. He was afraid. He was afraid of me. Building the trap. After that confrontation, I knew I had maybe 2 weeks before he would try to fire me or force me out. People like Richard, when they're exposed, they don't accept accountability. They double down. They attack. So I accelerated my timeline. I called Laura Kessler back and played her the recording. She listened to the entire thing without interrupting. When it was done, she was quiet for a long moment. "This is good," she said. "This is really good. But we need more. We need pattern evidence. We need to show that this isn't just one campaign. We need to show that this is his method of operation." Over the next 10 days, I did something I'm not entirely proud of. I gathered everything. I reached out to 4 people who had worked under Richard before me. I sent them messages on LinkedIn, just checking in, and then I asked them, carefully, about their experience working with him. 3 of them responded, and all 3 had the same story. Ideas stolen, work attributed elsewhere. Brilliant work buried, while Richard's name got elevated. One of them, A woman named Julia, who had left Mercer in 2020, said something that made me feel less alone. "I always knew it was him," she wrote in a private message. "But I didn't have proof, and even if I did, who would believe me against someone with his reputation? He was the senior guy. I was just a junior analyst. I just wanted to leave and try to forget about it." I asked her if she would be willing to document her experience. She said yes. She sent me a written statement detailing 3 campaigns she had worked on, with dates and descriptions of how Richard had claimed her work. 2 other women did the same thing. By September 14th, I had a file. A real, documented, pattern-based file showing years of intellectual property theft. I had recordings. I had written statements. I had emails. I had performance metrics that proved my work had led to measurable results for the company. I had proof that Richard Caldwell was a fraud. Laura reviewed everything and said the same word 3 times. Airtight, airtight, airtight. Then she asked me the question I needed to answer. "What do you want to do with this?" I thought about all the sleepless nights. I thought about calling my mother to tell her I couldn't pay her mortgage. I thought about the way people had looked at me when I came back to the office after losing the Beacon position. I thought about Richard's voice when he'd said I wasn't ready. "I want the industry to know," I said. "I want him to lose everything I lost." "We'll start with HR," Laura said. "Then the board, then, if necessary, we go public. We contact journalists. We make sure this follows him." I nodded. On September 15th, I was supposed to be starting my new job at Beacon Analytics. Instead, I walked into Mercer and Associates and scheduled a meeting with the HR director. The reveal. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Richard had made a very specific mistake. 2 months before the Beacon interview, he had applied for a position at another company. A bigger firm, more prestigious, more money. He had gotten the job. He had accepted the offer verbally, and he was supposed to give notice on the same day Beacon was supposed to notify him that I had gotten the director role. The plan was simple. He would leave Mercer and take credit for all the campaigns I had built. He would establish himself at the new company with a portfolio of work that looked like his own success. He would become irreplaceable. And me, I would be stuck at Mercer, unable to move up because he would have already undermined my credibility. I would be tied to him through work, still creating things that he could claim ownership of, until I got frustrated enough to leave on my own. But then Beacon had called to offer me the director position, and Richard had panicked. If I left Mercer for a director role at Beacon, I would be out of his reach. I would be building a career separate from him. And worse, I would have real authority, real credibility, and the platform to tell people about what he'd done. So he'd sabotaged me. But in sabotaging me, he had left fingerprints. He had called Beacon and recommended against me, which was documented. He had done it after I had already accepted the position, which made it clear it wasn't about evaluation, it was about intervention. What I found out on September 15th, when I walked into HR with Laura, was that Richard had then doubled down on that mistake. After I lost the Beacon position, he had started telling people that I was emotionally unstable, that I couldn't handle pressure, that I was considering leaving the company because I was having issues. He had documented these conversations. He had even suggested to the HR director, in a casual email, that they might want to monitor me for potential mental health concerns. He had created a paper trail that made it look like he was concerned for my well-being, when really he was building a story that would make anyone I complained to dismiss my claims as the ravings of an unstable person. It was elegant, it was calculated, and it was documented in his own emails. The HR director, a woman named Patricia who had never liked Richard but had tolerated him because he brought business to the company, read through the emails I provided. She read the statements from the other women. She listened to the recording of my conversation with Richard. Her face went very still. "My God," she said quietly, "how long has this been happening?" That question changed everything. Within 24 hours, the board was notified. Within 48 hours, Richard was informed that his employment was under review pending investigation. Within 1 week, he was fired. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory came 4 days later when I got a call from Margaret Chen at Beacon Analytics. "We heard what happened," she said, "and we want to apologize. We made a decision based on incomplete information, and it cost you something significant. We'd like to make it right." They offered me the director position again. Same salary, bonus to cover my losses during the period I was unemployed, a formal apology to be included in my personnel file. I said yes. The best part was knowing that they also did something else. They contacted the other firm, the one Richard had been planning to jump to, and told them about the investigation. Richard never made it to that job. His offer was rescinded. His reputation was destroyed. He had spent 3 years stealing work, sabotaging employees, and protecting himself with lies. And I had dismantled it all with documentation and patience, and the kind of cold, calculated planning that only comes when you have nothing left to lose. The final reckoning. I didn't see Richard after the firing. I didn't need to. The confrontation had already happened in email chains and HR meetings and recorded conversations. But 2 months later, when I was settled in my new office at Beacon Analytics, with a team of 8 people reporting to M and real authority to make decisions, I got a call from Laura. "He's suing the company for wrongful termination," she said. "He's claiming discrimination. He's claiming that he was scapegoated and that the investigation was biased." I felt something cold move through my chest. "Will he win?" I asked. "No," Laura said, "but he will depose you. He will try to make you look like the villain in his story. He will try to convince the judge that this is about a disgruntled employee getting revenge." The deposition was scheduled for January 15th. I spent the holidays preparing with Laura. We went through every piece of evidence. We practiced every question. We talked about what he would say, what his lawyer would argue, and how to respond without emotion. On January 15th, I put on a navy suit and drove to the courthouse. The deposition room was small and cold. Richard was there with his lawyer. I could see it in his face the moment I walked in. He was afraid of me. He had expected me to be crying or angry. He had expected me to give him something to work with. Instead, I was calm. I was composed. I was the girl who had learned to hide her rage so well that it looked like peace. His lawyer asked me questions about my work at Mercer, about the campaigns I had built, about my relationship with Richard, about my motivations for filing the complaint. "Did you resent Mr. Caldwell for recommending against you for the Beacon position?" the lawyer asked. "I resented that he lied," I said. "I don't resent that he made a professional recommendation. I resent that he called a company where I had already been offered a job and told them I wasn't ready, when the truth was that he was protecting his own interests." "And how did that make you feel?" "It made me understand that I needed to protect myself," I said, "that nobody was going to do it for me." The lawyer objected to the characterization, but the statement was out. The judge had heard it. When they showed Richard the emails, his own emails, where he had called me unstable and suggested monitoring for mental health concerns, I watched his face. He tried to explain them away. He said they were taken out of context. He said they were expressions of genuine concern. But the judge, a woman named Harriet Morrison, who had been on the bench for 20 years and had seen every version of this lie that existed, was not buying it. The case was decided 4 months later. Wrongful termination claim was dismissed. Breach of contract claim was dismissed. The judge ruled that Mercer and Associates had just cause to terminate Richard Caldwell's employment based on documented evidence of intellectual property theft and creation of a hostile work environment through gaslighting and deliberate misrepresentation. Richard Caldwell was ordered to pay a portion of Mercer's legal fees. But the real loss wasn't financial. The real loss was what happened next. Exposure. 6 months after the lawsuit was dismissed, a journalist named David Walsh published an article in Marketing Week magazine titled "The Architecture of Theft: How One Executive Built His Career on His Employees' Work." The article was about Richard Caldwell. The article included interviews with me, with Julia, with the other 2 women who had worked under him. The article included email chains. The article included performance metrics showing the exact correlation between the work I had done and the company's revenue increases. The article was published online, and then it was shared, and then it was discussed in industry forums, and then it became a case study in business school ethics classes about workplace fraud and systemic protection of predatory management. Richard Caldwell's name became synonymous with intellectual property theft. No company would hire him. No one would work for him. He became a cautionary tale, a name that people used as shorthand for a particular kind of betrayal. I didn't write the article. I didn't contact the journalist. Laura had done that as part of our strategy to ensure that the truth didn't die with the legal case. And I felt, I need to be honest about this, I felt satisfied in a way I had never felt satisfied before. Not happy. Satisfaction is different from happiness. It's cooler. It's the feeling of a plan executed perfectly. It's the feeling of watching someone face exactly what they deserve to face. 1 year after the article was published, I got a call from my mother. "Someone came into the clinic today," she said. "Said they used to work with you, said to tell you thank you." "Who?" I asked. She wouldn't give her name, but she said that your story gave her the courage to come forward about her own boss. She said she's filing a complaint. She said she wants her company to know the truth. I realized in that moment that what I had done had ripples, that by destroying Richard, I had given other people permission to fight back. I had shown that it was possible to document the truth and win. I had given people hope. But I had also made a choice, a long time ago, to cancel my resignation notice. I had made the choice to stay, to watch, to gather evidence, to wait. And in doing all of that, I had become someone different, someone colder, someone more strategic, someone who understood that the world doesn't reward goodness, it rewards preparation. I'm still at Beacon Analytics. I'm still building campaigns. I'm still getting better at my job. But I'm doing it differently now. I'm more careful about who I trust. I'm more deliberate about what I share. I'm more aware of the systems that protect people like Richard and the ways those systems need to be dismantled. The girl who stayed. My mother asked me, about 6 months ago, if I regretted it. If I regretted staying, if I regretted spending all that time gathering evidence, if I regretted turning revenge into justice. And I told her the truth. I regret that I had to do it. I regret that the system doesn't protect people like me, that the system instead protects people like Richard. I regret that I had to become cold and calculated to survive. But I don't regret the choice itself. Because I learned something in that process. I learned that the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm when someone expects you to break. That the most devastating thing you can do is document the truth when someone expects you to forget. That the most important thing you can do is refuse to let someone else write your story. I was told I wasn't ready for promotion. I was told I was unstable. I was told I was confused about how things work. And instead of believing that story, instead of internalizing that narrative, I gathered evidence and told a different story. A story where I was smart enough and brave enough and patient enough to destroy the person who tried to destroy me. That's the story I believe now. And every time I walk into my office at Beacon Analytics, every time I make a decision, every time I mentor one of the people on my team, I remember the girl who sat in that conference room and felt her rage crystallize into something sharp and purposeful. I remember that I was never not ready. The system just wasn't ready for someone like me. Someone who was willing to stay when everyone expected her to run.